It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon at Finch's Diner, a small vintage eatery nestled on the corner of Main Street in a sleepy New England town. The neon open sign flickered faintly as the bell above the door chimed. A man in his late 50s entered, dressed in a tailored but understated suit, his graying hair combed neatly. His eyes scanned the room with a quiet intensity. Clara, the sole waitress on duty, looked up from the counter. With her auburn hair tied back in a ponytail and her uniform slightly wrinkled from the long shift, she smiled politely. "Table for one?" The man nodded. "By the window, please." Clara grabbed a menu and led him to a booth by the glass pane, where sunlight streamed in. As she placed the menu on the table, the man studied her for a moment longer than expected, as if trying to gauge something beneath her practiced smile. "Can I get you started with a drink?" she asked. "Coffee." "Black," he replied curtly. Clara hurried to the counter, her thoughts racing. Something about him seemed familiar, but she couldn't place it. Customers trickled in and out of Finch's daily, but this man carried an air of authority, like someone used to making decisions that mattered. Meanwhile, at the booth, the man opened his leather wallet, an expensive, well-worn piece embossed with initials. He thumbed through several crisp $100 bills before deliberately placing the wallet on the edge of the table, slightly ajar, its contents visible. Clara returned with his coffee, her cheerful demeanor unshaken. "Here you go. Let me know if you're ready to order." "Not yet," he said, pushing the menu aside. "I'll have a look in a minute." As she turned away, he sipped his coffee and leaned back, observing the diner through the reflection in the window. His wallet remained conspicuously exposed, a subtle but deliberate move. By 3 p.m. the diner was nearly empty. Clara wiped down the counter, glancing occasionally at the man. He seemed lost in thought, occasionally jotting notes into a small leather notebook. Finally, he stood up, leaving the wallet behind. Clara noticed immediately. She hesitated, unsure whether to approach him or leave it be. Before she could decide, the bell above the door jingled. He was gone. Hours passed. The wallet remained untouched on the table. Evening shadows crept across the diner, as Clara, closing up for the night, finally walked over to the booth. Her fingers brushed the smooth leather as she picked it up. Peering inside, she spotted an ID card. "Alexander Whitmore," she read aloud. Her stomach dropped. Whitmore, the reclusive billionaire known for his investments and charity foundations. What was someone like him doing here in her small-town diner? Torn between curiosity and a sense of duty, Clara locked the wallet in the back office and decided to wait until morning. The thought of calling the number on the ID card felt overwhelming. What if it was a test? Stories of billionaires planting traps to gauge honesty weren't unheard of. As dawn broke, Clara arrived early to open the diner. She retrieved the wallet, staring at it for a long moment. Just then, the door jingled again and in walked Whitmore, dressed in a casual sweater this time, a hint of a smile on his face. "Good morning," he said. "I believe I left something here yesterday." Clara hesitated, her pulse quickening. Would returning it immediately make her seem dishonest for not calling him sooner, or was her caution justified? She reached into the drawer beneath the counter and handed him the wallet. "You left this," she said simply. Whitmore took it, opening it with deliberate slowness. The bills and cards were intact, untouched. His smile widened. "You're an honest woman, Clara. That's rare these days." Clara forced a laugh. "You're lucky nobody else picked it up." "Luck had nothing to do with it," he replied cryptically. Then, pulling out a business card, he slid it across the counter. "I have an opportunity for people like you, if you're interested. Think of it as a thank you." As she looked down at the card, her heart raced. Embossed in bold letters was the name Whitmore Foundation and a private number. "You passed the test," he said, standing to leave. "Now, let's see what you'll do with it." And with that, he walked out, leaving Clara standing frozen, the card clutched in her hand. Little did she know, this was only the beginning. Clara sat at her small kitchen table, the business card still in her hand. The faint aroma of coffee brewing in her percolator filled the cramped apartment as sunlight streamed through the thin curtains. She flipped the card over and over, rereading the embossed letters. Whitmore Foundation, private line. Her phone buzzed, pulling her attention momentarily. It was a text from her best friend, Jenny. "Lunch at Tony's. Your treat this time." Clara set the card down, staring at it as if it might disappear. The offer from Alexander Whitmore weighed heavily on her mind. She knew little about the billionaire, apart from what she'd read in business magazines and heard in passing. His philanthropy work was renowned, but stories of his unorthodox methods had also circulated. Tests of character, cryptic challenges, even rumors of deals that seemed too good to be true. At noon she met Jenny at Tony's Pizza. The restaurant buzzed with its usual lunchtime crowd, the air thick with the smell of garlic and freshly baked dough. Jenny leaned forward eagerly as Clara recounted the events of the previous day. "Wait a minute," Jenny said, her fork pausing mid-air. "You're telling me Alexander Whitmore, the guy who owns like half the city, tested your honesty and now wants to give you some kind of opportunity? That's insane." Clara shrugged. "It feels off. Why me? I'm just a waitress. There are a million other people out there better suited for whatever he's offering." Jenny smirked. "Maybe that's why he chose you. Or maybe he's bored and this is his version of reality TV. Either way, what's the harm in calling him?" "I don't know." Clara trailed off, the card burning a hole in her pocket. "Look," Jenny said, pointing her fork at Clara for emphasis. "The worst thing that happens, it's a scam and you hang up. But the best thing, you could be sitting on the opportunity of a lifetime." That evening, Clara finally gave in. Sitting cross-legged on her worn couch, she dialed the number. The line rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. "Whitmore Foundation. How may I assist you?" Clara hesitated. Hi. My name's Clara. I was given this card by Mr. Whitmore yesterday. He said I should call." "One moment," the voice said. A faint clicking followed, and then Alexander Whitmore's smooth, familiar voice came through. "Clara, I was beginning to think you wouldn't call. I wasn't sure if I should," she admitted. "That speaks volumes," he replied, a smile evident in his tone. "I have a proposition for you. Come to my office tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock. The address is on the card." Before she could respond, the line went dead. The next morning, Clara stood outside a gleaming skyscraper in the heart of the city. The Whitmore Foundation's logo, a minimalist W, was etched into the glass doors. Taking a deep breath, she pushed them open. Inside, the reception area exuded luxury, marble floors, high ceilings, and an air of quiet efficiency. A receptionist directed Clara to the top floor, where she was greeted by a personal assistant and led to Whitmore's expansive office. The room was lined with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of the city. Whitmore sat behind a large mahogany desk, his demeanor relaxed yet commanding. "Clara," he said, motioning for her to sit, "thank you for coming." "I'm not sure why I'm here," she confessed. Whitmore leaned forward. "I won't waste your time with pleasantries. I'm looking for someone trustworthy, someone who can keep a secret and act with integrity under pressure. Yesterday, you proved you're that person." Clara frowned. "But I'm just a waitress." "Precisely," he said, a glint of intrigue in his eyes. "You're unassuming. People underestimate you. That's exactly what I need for this endeavor." "What kind of endeavor?" He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick envelope, sliding it across the desk. Clara hesitated before picking it up. Inside was a bundle of cash, more money than she'd seen in her entire life. $10,000, Whitmore said. "A retainer, if you will. There's more where that came from if you agree to help me." Clara's pulse quickened. "Help you with what?" Whitmore's gaze sharpened. "There's a man, Harold Green, a former business partner of mine who's been skimming money from a charitable fund. I need proof. You'll be working as an undercover assistant in his company." Her stomach churned. "You want me to spy on someone?" "Let's call it observing," he said. "And before you ask, yes, it's legal. What he's doing, however, is not. I need someone I can trust to uncover the truth." Clara shook her head. "Why not hire a professional investigator?" "Because professionals have agendas," he said. "You, Clara, have no ties to this world. You're perfect." That night Clara lay awake, the envelope of cash sitting on her dresser, the weight of Whitmore's request pressed heavily on her chest. Was she really considering this? She thought of the diner, the endless hours, and the mounting bills she could barely keep up with. $10,000 was more than a lifeline. It was a chance to start over. But at what cost? Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. "We're counting on you. Good luck tomorrow." It was signed simply, A.W. The following morning, Clara found herself in an entirely new world. Gone were the comforting smells of freshly brewed coffee and the hum of Finch's diner. In their place stood the austere corporate environment of Green Ventures. Clara adjusted her new blazer. a purchase made hastily the night before with a fraction of the retainer Whitmore had given her, and took a deep breath before stepping into the sleek glass building. She was greeted by a receptionist who introduced herself as Melanie and led her to the HR office. "Mr. Green personally requested you be fast-tracked through orientation," Melanie explained with a polite but curious smile. "Not many new hires get that kind of attention." Clara forced a nervous laugh. "I guess I got lucky." In truth, Whitmore's influence had ensured her entry into Harold Green's inner circle. Clara's cover story was simple. She was a junior administrative assistant, hired to help streamline operations for Green's numerous charitable projects. It was a position that placed her close enough to the man himself to observe his dealings, but not so close as to raise suspicion. By midday, Clara was seated at a desk outside Harold Green's private office. The man himself breezed in shortly after lunch, a commanding figure in his early 60s, with salt-and-pepper hair and an expensive navy suit that matched his sharp, calculating demeanor. "Clara, right?" he said, barely glancing at her as he dropped a leather briefcase onto her desk. "I need these reports filed before the board meeting at 3. Don't mess it up." "Of course, Mr. Green," she replied, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. As Green disappeared into his office, Clara opened the briefcase. Inside was a mix of mundane documents, meeting agendas, budget summaries, and one file marked confidential. Her fingers hovered over it for a moment. Was this what Whitmore wanted her to find? She glanced around. The other employees were engrossed in their own work, paying her no attention. Heart racing, Clara slid the confidential file into her bag before closing the briefcase. Later that evening, Clara sat in her apartment staring at the file. Opening it felt like crossing a line she wasn't sure she could come back from, but the thought of Whitmore's cryptic assurance, "You're the perfect person for this," echoed in her mind. Finally, she opened the file. Inside were spreadsheets detailing charitable donations and corresponding withdrawals from Green's accounts. At first glance, everything appeared legitimate, but as Clara dug deeper, discrepancies began to emerge. Sums of money marked as allocated but with no clear destination. One entry caught her eye, a transfer labeled Special Ops, Anonymous Recipient, for $50,000. She took photos of the documents, her hands trembling. The next day at Green Ventures, Clara noticed something unsettling. Harold Green seemed unusually attentive. He called her into his office under the pretense of discussing a routine task, but his sharp gaze never left her. "You're adapting well," he said, his tone casual but probing. "It's not often we find someone with your discretion." "Thank you," Clara replied, feigning confidence. "I'm just trying to do my best." Green's lips curved into a thin smile. "Keep it up. In this business, trust is everything." As she left his office, a cold chill ran down her spine. Did he know she'd taken the file? Was this a warning? That evening, Clara met with Whitmore in a discreet coffee shop on the outskirts of the city. He arrived precisely on time, his usual calm demeanor intact. "You have something for me?" he asked, sliding into the booth across from her. Clara handed him the photos of the documents. "There are some discrepancies, but I'm not sure what they mean." Whitmore examined the images carefully, his expression unreadable. Finally, he looked up. "This confirms my suspicions. Green's been funneling money into offshore accounts under the guise of charitable initiatives." "Why not go to the authorities?" Clara asked. "You have the evidence now." "Not enough," Whitmore said. "These documents are just the tip of the iceberg. If I go to the authorities now, Green will cover his tracks before they can act. I need you to find more." Clara's stomach churned. "You want me to keep spying on him?" "Observing," Whitmore corrected, his voice firm. "You're in a unique position, Clara. Green trusts you, or at least he doesn't suspect you yet. I need you to keep digging." "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted. "I'm not a spy. I'm just a waitress." Whitmore leaned forward, his eyes intense. "You're more than that. You're capable, resourceful, and most importantly, honest. That's why I chose you." Clara sighed, her mind racing. "What happens if I get caught?" "You won't," Whitmore said confidently. But his calm tone did little to ease her anxiety. The tension at Green Ventures escalated over the next few days. Clara's movements were careful, her actions measured. But one afternoon, as she was sorting through documents in a shared filing room, a voice startled her. "Looking for something?" She turned to see Harold Green standing in the doorway, his arms crossed and an inscrutable expression on his face. Clara forced a smile. Just organizing these files like you asked. Green stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. You're a curious one, aren't you? I like that, up to a point. Her pulse quickened as she realized she'd left her phone, with the camera app open, on the desk beside her. Green's gaze flicked to it briefly before returning to her. The air between them was thick with unspoken tension. Careful, Clara, he said, his voice low and deliberate. In this business, curiosity can be dangerous. That night, Clara sat in her apartment, every nerve on edge. She had underestimated Green, his sharp instincts and veiled threats. As she replayed the encounter in her mind, her phone buzzed. A new message appeared. You've come too far to stop now. Be brave. A.W. Clara stared at the screen, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. She was in over her head, but the truth about Harold Green was so close she could feel it. All she had to do was take one more step. Clara arrived at Green Ventures the next morning, with a sinking feeling in her stomach. Harold Green's veiled threat the day before was still fresh in her mind. Every step through the sleek hallways felt heavier than the last. Her every move seemed magnified, her breathing louder. She was no longer sure if she was walking freely or if she was being led into a carefully laid trap. At her desk, a sealed envelope marked "Urgent" awaited her. Clara's hands trembled as she opened it, revealing a brief handwritten note from Green himself. Meet me in the conference room at noon. Come alone. She stared at the note, her heart pounding. Was this a confrontation? Or worse, had he uncovered her connection to Whitmore? She glanced at the clock. 2 hours. Time dragged as Clara tried to focus on routine tasks, her thoughts racing. Shortly before noon, she slipped into the restroom, her trembling fingers pulling out her phone to text Whitmore. He wants to meet. Not sure what to do. Almost instantly, a reply came through. Stay calm. Stick to the story. You're there for answers. Trust yourself. She swallowed hard and slipped the phone back into her pocket. Trust herself? She wasn't sure she could. At precisely 12, Clara entered the conference room. Green was already there, seated at the head of a long glass table. A laptop and several folders sat before him. He gestured for her to sit. Clara, he began, his voice as smooth as ever, you've been doing exceptional work. I wanted to discuss your potential. Thank you, Clara said cautiously, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Green leaned back, folding his hands. In this business, loyalty is everything. I like to believe I'm a good judge of character, and yet, occasionally, I'm surprised. Clara froze. The air grew thick with unspoken accusations. I've noticed you have a particular interest in certain files, Green continued, his tone still conversational, but with an edge that sent chills down her spine. Care to explain? Clara's mind raced. Stick to the story. I've just been trying to learn the ropes, she said. I thought reviewing those files would help me understand the company better. Green's expression didn't waver. Curious. That level of initiative is rare for someone so new, almost as if you have other motivations. Before Clara could respond, the door opened and a security officer entered, followed by 2 other employees carrying stacks of documents. Green waved them in, and the materials were placed on the table. These, Green said, gesturing to the piles, are records of every transaction this company has made in the past year, including some that seem questionable. Transactions someone seems particularly interested in. Clara's throat went dry. Was this a test, or had Green already pieced everything together? You see, Clara, Green said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, this company runs on trust, but trust, once broken, is irreparable. The door burst open again, and this time Alexander Whitmore strode in. His calm, commanding presence filled the room, and for the first time, Green's composure faltered. What is the meaning of this? Green demanded, rising from his chair. I think you know, Whitmore said, his voice cold. He placed a folder on the table. These documents, combined with what Clara found, are enough to bring your entire operation crashing down. Clara's head spun. How had Whitmore gotten here so quickly? And what was in that folder? Clara, my dear, Green said, his tone turning mocking, did you think this man was your savior? He's no better than me. Enough, Whitmore snapped. This isn't about me. It's about the millions you've siphoned from charities meant to help the vulnerable. Green's laugh was sharp, almost gleeful. You're no hero, Whitmore. You've always played dirty, and dragging this poor girl into your schemes, it's low. Even for you. Clara's chest tightened. What is he talking about? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Whitmore didn't flinch. He's deflecting, trying to shift the focus. The evidence speaks for itself, Clara. But doubt gnawed at her. The cryptic messages, the envelope of cash, the insistence on secrecy, it all suddenly felt suffocating. Before the tension could escalate further, sirens wailed outside. Moments later, federal agents stormed the room, their badges flashing. Harold Green, the lead agent said, stepping forward, you're under arrest for fraud and embezzlement. As Green was cuffed and escorted out, he turned to Clara one last time. You think you're free of this? You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. The aftermath was a blur. Clara found herself outside the building, Whitmore by her side. The air was crisp, the city's hum a stark contrast to the chaos inside. You did well, Whitmore said, his tone reassuring. Clara turned to him, her expression conflicted. Did I? Green's gone, but what now? He wasn't wrong about you, was he? Whitmore's jaw tightened. You're asking the wrong questions, Clara. The real question is, what will you do now? You've proven yourself capable of more than you imagined. He handed her another envelope, this one thinner. Inside was a check made out to her for $100,000. A token of my appreciation, he said, and an invitation. The Whitmore Foundation could use someone like you if you're interested. Clara stared at the check, her emotions swirling. Relief, doubt, anger, pride, they all collided. She had entered this world as a waitress, drawn into a web of deception she never asked for, and now she was being offered a chance to stay. She looked up at Whitmore, his expression unreadable. I need time, she said. Take all the time you need, he replied, stepping into a waiting car. But don't wait too long. Opportunities like this don't come twice. As the car disappeared into traffic, Clara stood on the sidewalk, the check heavy in her hand. For the first time, her future was entirely in her own control. The question was, would she step forward or walk away?